All right, so thank you for joining late afternoon session. I'm Nathan Wallace. I'm with Web First. We are a Drupal agency, and we primarily work with the federal government. And today I'm going to be talking about governance and how you can implement it in Drupal. The central idea for the session is that governance doesn't fail because teams don't care, but because the rules are really disconnected from the point in time in which decisions are made. So I thought that embedding governance within Drupal and making it visible, contextual, and much harder to ignore was a tactic that was useful, especially when governance is limited to policy documents that don't always reach the people that they're intended for. So I really saw embedding the governance in Drupal as a way to act and see on governance fundamentals and give people the tools in Drupal to make that really tangible. So here's the breakdown of the agenda for today. And first, we're just going to have a quick chat about what is content governance really. So I invite some of your feedback there. And then we're going to talk about why governance tends to fail when it's being implemented. And then I'll shift more into how we actually implement this in Drupal, what the in-page governance pattern is, and how we can map Drupal concepts to these features via simple fundamentals like fields and workflows. And then we'll talk about rollout tips and future opportunities. And there will be a small demo of the content governance module. So, what is content governance really? And I actually want to invite y'all to participate. Does anyone have anything to share about an experience they've had with content governance or what they think the most important parts of content governance are? Anyone have anything to share? Go ahead.
Put the highlight image in, make sure you put the marketing blurb in, make sure that you do things that would be appropriate, no cleavage. I guess that's maybe just a content guide, but it needs to tie to governance.
That's right. Yeah, I think content style guides is definitely part of it. And you mentioned stakeholders that express standards for other people to abide by. So I think you're onto something there. And I think governance comes in different forms, and it really depends on how you're interacting with content on a website. I think it does include, some people it means approval. Some people it means that style guide. Some people focus on accessibility. Some people focus on the editorial process and ownership. And for this talk, I really want to focus on content governance as the operating model behind content quality. So all the things that go into that, who owns it, who can change it, what standards apply, when it gets reviewed, and simply how to tell if something's out of compliance or simply is stale. So governance isn't really a checklist, but it's really the structure of all these things that maintains a site's trustworthiness. And I think a distinction between strategy and governance is worth mentioning now is content strategy is really the what and the why. So this is really about the goals, the audiences, the priorities, the voice. I think other speakers today have really touched on these. And governance is really the how and the who. And I'm going to talk more about this today. And this is the strategies that are executed via roles, review cycles, decision rights, and the lifecycle management rules. And I've worked with a lot of organizations, and they typically tend to focus a lot on strategy when they're building a new website, and sometimes underinvest in governance. And what this results in is a website that is great when it first starts out. Things are all approved, everyone's signed off, but then over time, things start to drift, and things become inconsistent, unorganized, and for informational sites, most higher ed sites fall under that category. When things are inconsistent and inaccurate, you're really not meeting the needs of your audience. And I really like this 4 Ps breakdown, and it really breaks it down into people, and these are a huge part of the process. These are your creators, editors, approvers. The process is really the workflow from idea to review through publishing and archiving. Policy is the standards we all care about: brand, accessibility, legal, compliance, plain language. and the platform. And the platform is really the thing that's supposed to help reinforce the other 3 Ps. And the important part is that most teams document the first 3, but sometimes the platform isn't built to reinforce them. So I'm really focused on how we can bring that into Drupal. And when it's in Drupal, it really does become more concrete, and it breaks down to these 5 questions. Who owns the content? Who can change it? What standards apply? When is it reviewed? And what happens if it's out of compliance? And Drupal can do all of these things. But before we get into the Drupal part, let's talk about why governance fails in real life. And it's not because teams don't care, but it's because ownership is ambiguous. Standards live somewhere else. Reviews are informal. Editors are under time pressure. Publishing is optimized for speed. And governance is often treated as a sidecar. And this is the real world problem I want to check out, and let's look at some examples of this. The first is docs don't ship. When authors are working in Drupal, I know not everyone works in Drupal directly to create the content, but when people are interacting with Drupal, the governance usually isn't directly available to them. It's usually in a PDF, a wiki page, a slide deck, and when this happens, the information is not where it needs to be at the right time, and alignment again strays over time. The second issue that often comes up is, I mentioned this, it's invisible at publish time. So think about how edits are typically made on a website. You get a request. Maybe it's a service request and it has a ticket. And it tells you to update a number, add a sentence. You paste that from Word, you change the headline, you swap the call to action, and you click publish. At that point, you're missing a few key bits of information that the CMS could be capturing. Things like, is this page still aligned with its purpose? Did the right owner review it? Did this introduce accessibility issues? And should the review date be updated or changed? And these signals typically are not present in Drupal at the moment of publishing. And that tends to be the point where it matters most. Or at least you can have signals at that point to let people know what they may be missing. Here's a little breakdown of what happens and what should happen. And it's a reiteration of what I just said. People usually go in, they have a very targeted update to make. They make the update, they add content. They don't necessarily review the rest of the content, and they publish it. But what should happen is a moment of reflection. That's really the module concept that I put together really invites that moment to reflect, notify the right content owner at that time, trigger an action for accessibility checks, or update a lifecycle phase. And I'm not saying that every small update needs big bureaucracy behind it or a complex workflow, just that the CMS should be creating signals for the content providers to tell them what they should be thinking about. And I have a little line here. Good governance is often just well-timed friction. We don't want to keep people from doing their job, but we want to give them the information they need at the right time. And people might be familiar with this term. Slow decay, especially the last reviewed. Maybe you see this, last reviewed 2019. As I mentioned, most sites don't become chaotic overnight. They actually slowly decay over time. The owner leaves, the review date passes, or policies change. Small compromises start to stack up, and eventually you see things like last updated 2019. That's an indication that you do have a governance problem. And I do think that governance is the difference between a healthy, useful website and one that essentially becomes unreliable. So let's get into Drupal. I figure everyone is familiar with Drupal since we're at Drupal Camp, and this is where we take some of these tasks that the content lifecycle management process really is responsible for, and we combine a set of features in Drupal to really give folks tools to work across their organization and identify good governance. So we're going to look at how Drupal can help and take policies and training and turn them into features. So going from your document to actually translating that into an implementation. So if we translate this into design principles, the way that I thought of it was governance should be visible, contextual, and enforceable. This means that it should be visible, and so people can see the expectations as they're doing the work. Contextual means that the guidance appears when it's relevant. And enforceable means that whatever model you're subscribing to, your system can guide, warn, and block actions when necessary. And this is the basis of this idea of governance that you can see. And before we get into all-out Drupal, it's worth saying that there's no single governance model for every organization. Most universities have a hybrid model or a centralized model, but centralized models tend to provide stronger consistency across the site because there's one decision maker, but that also slows things down typically. And federated models usually drive faster publishing, but that's where you have more variation and more risk that people aren't staying consistent. And like I said, most organizations end up with some sort of hybrid model. And I think a lot of universities have departments that subscribe to, maybe they have a style guide from the university, but their approvals happen within the department. So I'd call that a hybrid model where you're getting guidance, but you kind of aren't being blocked from your central decision makers. And the important thing here is that Drupal can actually support all of these. You just want to set up your permissions and your workflows and your dashboards to match the operating model that you actually want. So let's talk about some tenets of governance, right? One of the most practical governance rules is that every page should answer who owns this. And it's not who created it 5 years ago. It's not which office vaguely cares about it, but who is actually accountable for this content. And in Drupal, we can do this with user reference fields, a department taxonomy, or differentiated roles or ownership dashboards. And we're going to see a couple of those examples today. I think where you want to start when you're talking about governance is how do you take governance data and make it metadata for your content. And this is super important because this is the mechanism that really allows you to hook into governance with Drupal. And it really stops being abstract when it becomes data. So this can be done with storing information as fields, which allows Drupal to display it, filter it, export it, and trigger workflows on it. So the metadata is really the core piece of this module that I'll be showing you today. Governance that is structured tends to be more visible and is harder to ignore. All right. Those of you who do content governance know that having a review cadence is really fundamental or foundational to actually having a process behind content reviews. So I really see this as one of the higher value patterns is the review clock. And we can do this in Drupal by using revision data, setting review expectations. The module that I'll be showing today lets you set review cadences, review dates, so you can have customized review cycles depending on the content type. And we can do this with Drupal patterns like date fields, reminders, moderation workflows, and expiration rules. Because a page that is never reviewed eventually is a liability. Where does this appear when you're editing in Drupal, or where should you apply these governance signals? Once you have the metadata, that's the real question. Where do you put it? And I think there's 4 key moments when you're editing content or working with content in Drupal. The first is viewing the page, editing the page, publishing the page, and I also threw in reporting, because I think a lot of content governance has to do with content data and spreadsheets, and you'll see that the module that we're going to see today facilitates getting the data out of Drupal, so you can use the tools that you may want to use outside of Drupal as well. So yeah, here we see a screenshot of what the module is going to provide you. This is I call it the governance panel. It's a front-end block that appears to authenticated users, specifically the content editors. And it's going to give you a breakdown just at a high level of whether this page is going to need to be reviewed soon, whether it's compliant or not. It's going to give you dates, the compliance window, and then I threw in the ability to email individuals from the page with one click. There's also the ability to have a content checklist here that you're seeing there, but right now there's no governance tasks available for this page. But this is really there for when you're about to edit something or reviewing pages. As you navigate a site, you're able to see these signals, identify ownership very quickly, and reach out to those people. The next is the editing screen. And this is where I call this the coaching moment. Instead of relying on someone to remember a style guide, right, from onboarding, or this is where you can actually put some guidance into the back end of Drupal itself. In this case, we're seeing a set of fields that were added that identify the page goal, the problem solved, and audience. And this can be helpful because this pattern helps authors know what they need to put in without having to go hunt it down. And then the last is, other than reporting, this is governance at publish time. And this is the idea that you're piggybacking off of workflows and you're able to have Drupal take action based on that workflow and based on what's been inputted for that page. So we're going to talk about using ECA to look at your governance fields, determine what may be there, what might be missing, and to be able to initiate workflows off of that. And to give users feedback so they know right away after they've published something if something's missing or not. And I'll show you a quick example of that in the demo. And like I said, Drupal already really has all these building blocks. I'm going to show a custom module, but a lot of this can be done through configuration. I think if I were to do this again, I'd consider wrapping this in a recipe rather than a custom module. But you'll see that really this is really just made up of through the form API extensions. You're able to attach fields to content types. You have permissions. You're going to tie into the workflows, and the content moderation module is also in play. So the problem really isn't the capabilities, it's really the orchestration of all these parts, and that's really what this governance pattern is focused on. So what this looks like is like I said, we built a lightweight module, and the architecture is pretty approachable. It follows pretty basic Drupal standards. So you need governance metadata fields. We'll take a look at the governance panel. We'll look at the form API extensions for the edit and publish screens, the workflow integration, and some of the permissions and visibility controls used. Here's a screenshot of the content ownership dashboard. And this is really just at a high level what you're going to want to get out of governance. You're going to want every page to have a owner. You want to have a place where they can go to and look at your standards, whether that's a link, maybe it's in the module I'll show you that we actually have an editable playbook tab where you're able to put your content guidance directly into Drupal pretty easily. We're going to talk about the publish time checks to catch avoidable issues and talk about how you can actually implement workflows for stale content. All right, before we get into the demo, I want to talk a little bit about how we rolled this out at a couple organizations where we tried this. There's oftentimes you might have a site, it might have anywhere from 4 content types, maybe 13 content types. The sites that I work with tend to have more on the higher end, 13, some different content types often. When you're implementing this for the first time, you're going to want to implement it in a small way first. That way you can work with the users, you can demonstrate the value, establish the metrics, and then have a path forward to scale. A lot of the things what we started to measure was the percentage of pages with owners. That was the first thing we did, was made sure every page had an owner. That's really step one. Then once you have an owner, you can commit to these review dates. You can contact those folks that have that responsibility. You can work with them, and you can reduce that stale content. And as you work in the accessibility checks, you can also flag them and work with folks to prevent them from happening. And we're going to talk about how this can scale through more content types, more workflows, the dashboard reporting, and how you can really automate some of these notifications and the different steps in the workflow. All right, so I'm moving pretty fast, but before we get into the demo, I do just want to talk about where this is going to go from here. What I'm going to talk about today does not really involve AI, but I will say that once you have the metadata and you have structured governance data in Drupal and you have workflows, you can really leverage some of the automation tools that are emerging. And what AI can do is really extend that even further by measuring your plain language, suggesting summarizations, filling in some of your taxonomy data that might be missing, and suggest how content should be organized. So that's really where we're going with this. And if you have a structure, you can really plug it into AI and really have it be assistive in this endeavor. But AI, as it becomes more useful, you're not going to want to replace human accountability with this, but it can support governance operations. AI should be assisting governance, but it should not become governance. You still want personal accountability for the content, because otherwise you'll just have more stale content or more content that has not been validated, and that's not what we want. So let's take a look at what this looks like in Drupal. So what we're going to take a look at is, I'm going to make this a little bigger. Oops, sorry. That's all right. All right, so I've got the Unami site, which is the demo site for Drupal set up here. And I've installed the content governance module, which is an experimental module on Drupal.org. And let's start with the settings. So this module has like I said, it's a roll-up of a few different features that we put together. So some of this is just establishing your information. So we have, you can name your governance office, you can set default values for your review cycles. You can actually opt in your content types here to attach governance fields as needed. Here's where you're actually able to create a checklist of tasks that will be attached to each piece of content by default. And here you simply can add it in by default, 1 per line. You also can set default governance fields. Let's say you always have the same owner. Well, you can set it up here, and all new content will be pre-filled with these things. So those are your governance fields that we're going to be working with. I have this tab called Playbook. This is where you can actually create a page within your governance dashboard that allows you to share basically a style guide, a sense of a style guide, or even if you have a workflow that's not defined in Drupal, you can talk about this is the workflow your content's supposed to go through. And I'll show you what that looks like, but you're actually able to edit here and add and remove guiding principles, change the roles and accountabilities that you're working with, customize your governance workflow, and the different types of information that you want to share with everyone that's in Drupal using your content or developing your content. There's also, I mentioned that there's a mashup of a few different features. One is that front-end compliance block I mentioned. You can turn that on or off. I went ahead and threw in the Wayback Machine integration. This is the idea that it runs a cron job, and it will take a Wayback snapshot of all your pages. For those of you who need to have a offsite archive of your content. In government, we need to do this, and I think higher ed also has this requirement in a lot of cases. And this simply allows this to run in the background and take snapshots of all your pages and save it to the Wayback Machine, which, for those of you who are familiar, that's a pretty cool feature. You also can turn off whether or not authors can mark content for deletion. We've also got email reminders. This is one of the features where what I wanted to do with this module was, although I wanted things to happen in Drupal, I wanted to make it easy to get information out of Drupal. So there's a concept of emails, email reminders. There's also, and this is based on review cadence, and you'll see the reporting feature, which allows you to create custom reports that can be emailed at a specific cadence to specific people. And here you can set up some of those defaults. And this is for testing purposes. You're able to load up some mock data, so that's still there for those of you who want to try it out. So that's the settings for the module. Let's take a look at what that looks like when viewing content. Let's start with viewing. So let's take a look at, again, this is the demo site for Drupal. We've got a recipe here in Spanish, and you see that there's the governance panel here, and it's saying that this content's overdue. If you click it, you can see that it's missing a last reviewed date, so that's going to put it as overdue. Here you can actually quickly email folks if you need to. This is where you can go and add governance tasks or mark them off. In this case, there's none here for this particular piece of content. So this is what you get with the front end visual, meant for quick, a quick view of whether it's compliant or not, and you can click through to see the editing fields that are attached when you install the plugin. So you're going to scroll all the way down to what is kind of a lengthy collection of fields here, but let's take a look. The first is goals and audience. This is really from a UX perspective. How do you establish and maintain a page goal? A lot of times you have one when the page is created and pages get repurposed. That changes over time. Here you're able to put that in, and if it changes, you're able to know this is no longer aligned. Maybe we need a new page. Maybe we need to take away the old page. And you're able to set audiences. Because again, if a lot of people have mentioned this, you can use AI to write for specific audiences. And as Drupal AI becomes more a part of this, you'll be able to use these fields in combination with Drupal AI to, let's say, generate content for specific audiences on your website. So that's what's good about these fields here. Here's a little bit about the lifecycle management features, where you're able to set the review cadence for this particular piece of content and set up a last reviewed date. Here's a governance checklist, which you can add and remove items from, and this is what appears on that front end as a checklist. This is really, there's default values you can put in here, but this is really meant at a team level. What do you need? And you're able to set up a checklist for your content editors to be able to go through. The next is, I call it stewardship, but it's really the owners and the who should be contacted, who are the decision makers for the different pages. I threw in some notes, and this is where you're able to actually flag content for deletion. This is either a feature that's enabled or not. Some sites, they don't want people to be able to delete pages, but this allows people to elect pages to be deleted. and then you can report on that and go and remove them. And it also has some information about, some of this is redundant, but it's good for reporting. You have the setup date and setup user. These are the governance fields that we've put together on the pieces of content. And now if we go to the content tab, you're going to see a new item on your local task menu called governance. So let's check that out. This is what the module adds. Let's see how we're doing time. So we still got enough time to go through all this. So what we see here is just a high-level dashboard that's going to give you information about really what I wanted to expose was how many pages on the website actually have an owner or someone who's tagged to that piece of content. So this tells you a little bit about that. And we can go here and we're going to see the reporting features. And here you have the ability to build a report just by setting up some filters. Let's say I only want to get, information about the recipes. Let's say I want published only. I want overdue content only. I only want to see the overdue content. And I can set up my parameters for my report, and I can download that data. I also can save that report. And what I've done here is created a report for overdue reviews for a specific content type. And I can send that to myself once a week, and I'm going to get a spreadsheet with only what I need to look at, specifically what I'm responsible for. And this can be, set up as needed for all your content folks or decision makers. That's the custom report feature here. Back to the main page, that's your reports. I mentioned the way back snapshots. Here I've got local. The local installation doesn't quite support what I have going on here, but you're able to run your cron and have it generate snapshots basically every time you update a page, and you can see them listed here, and then you can click through and see your archived page on a Wayback Machine. That's the archival feature. This is pretty basic to implement. There's an API, and all I'm doing is really just creating a GUI for that API, and it uses their platform. So it's really very lightweight, no extra infrastructure, pretty powerful if Wayback Machine is enough for your organization. A lot of times they need more official archives, so sometimes Wayback Machine doesn't work for your organization, but there's other platforms that do this as well. But this is like the free version, let's call it. All right, so this is really about the archiving. So after pages should come down, you still want them to be archived, you still need them to be somewhere, you can do this. That is your Wayback snapshots. So we've covered reports, we've covered the snapshots. Here we see a high-level breakdown of what's compliant, what's not compliant. Compliance has to do with those governance fields and whether or not they're filled in with data. Also, whether or not the reviews have taken place within the time frame that's been allotted. So that's what this is a breakdown, and that's what it's showing. And it's also pulling out other insights from all these fields and creating highlights and pulling out these governance tasks into different views that are generated by different queries that I've set up. All right, so this is the kind of the content list view, but with all of your fields at the top. So a lot of times you need to search for stuff, and on the typical content tab, you're not going to have these fields. So I threw this in here with, a lot of times you're going to need to see anything overdue. Let's filter that, and we're going to see these all need to be reviewed very quickly. So instead of getting a report, you can go here, you can see it, you can filter and find what you need. All right, and then this is actually my favorite here because I mentioned that content ownership is really key to good governance. And what this does is for folks that are in charge of governance at the institutional level, they're going to want to see this. They're going to see, all right, well, we've got articles have owners. For some reason, there's good governance around this content, and you really can identify here where are you not doing your governance. And it breaks it down by content type. It breaks it down by what roles are being applied to each content. and who is most assigned these roles. So again, depending on how big your organization is, this can be useful to identify who you need to reach out to or what kind of content is really out of compliance and needs to be, focused on. That's the content ownership tab. And the last tab that we're going to take a look is the playbook that I mentioned. And this is really taking the concept that you have a style guide, and this is really a layout that's really flexible that allows you to embed some of this content into Drupal. Really, it's a glorified landing page that allows you to really modify the guiding principles, roles and accountability, governance workflow, and that's some of the fundamentals around your governance process that you just want people to know about. And this might be content that's in your PDF or your slide deck. You can just stick it here, and it's just more accessible. You can create links to this page and keep it up to date. So that's the parts and pieces of the governance module, but there's one more part I want to take a look at, and how you can use the content moderation module and also the ECA module to initiate workflows based on these fields and this information. So before we wrap up, let's take a look at that. For that, we're going to go to ECA. Who's familiar with the ECA module? Okay, a couple folks, yeah. So this is emerging. A lot of development teams are starting to see the value of this. I think it's kind of new for some of these bigger legacy sites. A lot of them haven't rolled this out quite yet, but it's a big deal in my work, and I think it's going to start to replace some of the custom code that we've traditionally been using. Now you can spin up workflows that facilitate some of this custom functionality that you're looking for with no code. So let's take a look at that and how we can use that in combination with the governance fields. I set one small example up. Let's take a look at that one. So what the ECA module includes is this modeler API here. And what this allows you to do is create a visual workflow that ties into Drupal at different points, grabs data, and lets you trigger different actions based on that data. What we see here is I like to use, this is where the content moderation module comes into play. I like to use workflow state transitions to initiate some of these actions. That way you can have a custom workflow, really define that, and then extend that even further with the ECA model. So here we're going to see that the circle is really like the initiator of a workflow. So that's what you see here, the circle. And here we have let's just recreate it here. So I add the circle, and it's going to ask me, what do you want to add? And I'm just going to start typing workflow. And here, since I have the content moderation module installed, I have the ability to check for state transition, right? And for those of you who are familiar with modeling, we can go ahead and add this. And before we configure that, we use this part, and we click here. And now there's a concept of tokens, and tokens aren't new, but they are used in this system to really pass data along. Folks that are familiar with event-driven architectures are familiar with JSON payloads that go from that are triggered by one event, pass it along to the next item in the workflow. Well, here you're using tokens. In this case, we've selected token. So actually, for this one, we're going to check the entity, and you can check all the different values on that entity that you're working with. In this case, it's the item that's being the workflow item that's changed the workflow state. So it's an entity in this case. And here, what this does is we'll just recreate the one right above here is we want to check a field. So if we check a field value, we want to see if it's empty or not. That's what we'll do. And if we look at the example, I've stuck a field in called field gov last review. This is one of the governance fields that the module adds. So what this does is when something goes from draft to, actually from any state to published, It's going to check if there's a missing field or if that field is empty. Based on that, you can do any number of things. This is where you can launch different Drupal hooks. You can send an email. You can redirect them to a new location. In this case, we have it displaying a warning to the user. And here you can set that warning. You can put your tokens in here, which are those variables that you're passing from one node on this workflow to another. And in this case, I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just sending a message to the user. And when they go into, if that field is missing, it's going to tell them a friendly governance message for you. This page has not been reviewed. So this is just a quick example of what that looks like. So I'm not going to save this since I didn't really finish that, but that's how quick it is to make a custom workflow. And this could be based on, it doesn't have to be governance related. It could be based on, if you're an admin, when you log in, take me to roles and permissions. If you're a content manager, forward me to the content list. So there's all sorts of different functionalities you can have happen with this. I'm just showing one example. And let's see how that works. So we've got, again, this sample piece of content. We see that it's overdue. We see that there's no last review date. So I'm going to go in and actually, instead of going in, let's go in. Let's scroll down, and let's see right here that there is no last review date here. So I'm going to leave that empty. Remember, our workflow said if this field's empty, show a message. So we should see when we go from draft or any moderation state to published, that workflow should be initiated, and if that field's empty, we should see the message. So I click save. All right, and we see this message. We see a friendly governance message for you. This page has not been reviewed. Go back. We're going to just demonstrate how this works, and I'm going to put a last reviewed date. And you can see now we're without code. I didn't get that message. We can do this with, you could have 5 things for each field, and you could say your page purpose was not put in. Email this person. You could put in, you could generate emails that say you missed 5 fields and put a link. So when they go to their email, they're going to see an email saying, I'm glad you published that page. These are the 5 things that weren't on it. Here's a link. And that just, again, gives them a signal, whether it's in Drupal, via email, and allows them to double check and really make visual governance. And that is the talk. And with that, I will take any questions or anything else that you guys want to chat about. That's, yeah.
So the report builder functionality, that tab when you were looking at the report builder, how is that implemented? Is that in the custom module?
That is in the custom module, yeah. Yeah, so that was really, it's similar to the listing filter. It's really just the ability to configure, your query basically, and then the part that it's saved, it just saves it as a little bit of data, so you know who to send it to, how often to send it to, and then it just runs that query, creates a spreadsheet.
And then second part to this, reminder emails that you're kicking out. Are you doing that? Is this like on a scheduled cron job? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, actually, that part there is there is part. Some of them are on a scheduled cron job, but the ones that you see on the governance panel, that actually just opens up a mail to link, basically. Okay. So I kind of took the easy way out on that. I just added the mail to link on the front end. So there's really no infrastructure behind that part of it. But yeah, the scheduled emails do run off a cron. Yeah.
Do you template that out? Is that are you using I don't know what easy mail or something like that? Or?
Nothing special. You are able to add body text to the email. Let's take a look at that. So here you can save a report. Let's say I want basic page, published only, compliant. And let's call it compliant report. let's say myself at Web First. I want it daily, weekly, monthly, let's say weekly. And then here's where you can schedule that. And you can actually throw in some like, hello, I know you need this. And save it, and there you go. It's gonna set it up and send it on that schedule. You can also just straight up download the data here. So I kind of made it the easy button. You can email it to yourself. You can download it. It really depends on, are you that person responsible for the overseeing of governance, or are you that content owner that needs a list of specific pages that you need to review?
All right, sorry, one more. Are you pushing this module out there anywhere? Is that out there?
It's on Drupal.org. I'd call this experimental at this phase. I think I would pull back on some of the features a little bit if I really wanted to get it out there. I think we are going to be implementing a version of this for a large government agency, but at this point, it's an experimental module. It's on Drupal.org. You can look it up, drupal.org/gov-. Definitely looking for collaboration. I got a few folks that I work with on Drupal stuff, and they're very kind. And anyone who, with the security, the ability to get it tested for security, that's always appreciated. Yeah.
So I will say in our system, it is available. We're having a bad relationship with it. It's the workflow module. Do you envision this to work in tandem with the workflow, to replace workflow? Is there a pathway to merge?
Yeah, I really see workflow, ECA, editorially, all these tools. I wouldn't want this tool to do those jobs. This is really much more about what is the governance? It's really about the metadata for governance, because workflow is about a lot of things. But if you're dealing with governance, it's about ownership, content lifecycle management, some of the guidance that you want to embed in Drupal. So I really see this as for that more specifically. And the reporting capabilities and emailing capabilities, I built that out just because I work with people that do this, and they need to be able to send people lists of pages that they need to look at. So I saw that as kind of just real world stuff. People always need to get data out of Drupal. And the module is set up currently. There's some hooks and the ability to get some of this data via API as well. And I mentioned agentic governance. I really see that a lot of this can be tied in with AI, and not to replace that human accountability, but to make those folks' jobs easier and to scale what they're doing. Because I mentioned websites with 10,000 pages, sometimes you need help. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Hopefully that was exciting.